Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's in My Head podcast. Today I'm joined by Sean Cashman. If you know the name, man, you know King of the Hill. You know Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. You know, what am I forgetting? I'm forgetting The Simpsons, man. So, Sean, I appreciate
Yes,
you taking some time for me today. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me too.
Anytime. A special shout out to Robert goes for this one, for
Yep,
setting this one up.
absolutely.
And usually, like I told you, I wait till halfway into the episode before I hit you with a question with Robert. But he wanted me to ask you two stories in particular. Now, like I
Okay.
said, Sean had worked on The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, and the first one he wanted me to see if you would talk about was when you came to work on The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, and then he gave you his board and his episode to slug. Do you remember that story that he's talking about?
Yes. Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, the funny thing was, I came to Cartoon Network um, after my stint on King of the Hill. I'd been on King of the Hill since season 2, and I was on all the way up to I think season 7. And then like everybody in the business, eventually, you get laid off. And so it was the first time in my short career where I found myself out of work, and thankfully through some friends of mine, Brian Sheasley being one of them, he was working there at the time, and they needed a director on Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. So I came down, I interviewed for it. The producer told me, he says, well, it's only going to be like a 5-month gig, because apparently, they never knew if they were ever going to get renewed. And I said, well, look, I'm out of work right now. If you need me, I'll take it. Well, long story short, 5 months turned into 5 years at Cartoon Network. So that all worked out. Yeah, when I got there, it was a weird thing for me, because having worked on the primetime shows like on The Simpsons and King of the Hill, animation timing sensibilities and comedic timing sensibilities was very different from what they were doing at Cartoon Network at the time. And that was like, really kind of golden age stuff going on at Cartoon Network at the time. And I quickly found out that what they were doing over there was really more up my alley than basically doing half-hour animated sitcoms. And because Billy and Mandy, we were doing 11-minute shorts. We were still doing actually some 7-minute shorts of the last of the Evil Concarnate shorts, which was also part of the Billy and Mandy universe. So it was like I actually kind of got to work on nice, short, compact, funny, cartoons, which were very akin in my liking to the old Warner Brothers shorts. Really kind of zany and fast timing and just all over the place, which is kind of more my sensibilities anyway. So, but I had a hard time. I had a hard time adjusting because King of the Hill was very kind of slow moving and had great humor, but sometimes it's as far as the animation goes, it was kind of watching paint dry, and so I go from that, to Billy and Mandy, which was very, very, very quick and snappy, and just really kind of out there. And I had met Robert by that time, and I knew of him, and I knew what he had done, and I knew of his career, and I knew what he was working on when I got there. And he had done a lot of stuff on Powerpuff Girls and the animated Star Wars way back when, and Samurai Jack and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I can learn a lot from him. So basically, I asked him if I could borrow one of his Powerpuff Girls storyboards that he had slugged for timing, that he had directed, and for the longest time that was like my Bible,
Yeah.
for me to adjust to my new position on Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. And so I have him to really kind of thank for really kind of instilling in me that sensibility that he has, that is so good. Now, as far as the other part of the story that he mentioned, I'm not quite so sure which part he's getting at there. Do you have any more you can feed me on that? And I'll try and answer that for you.
Let's just give us all the parts, and we'll see how it goes. He just wanted me to ask you pretty much the first time you get one of his boards to slug, and then he said, ask him about his experiences and the people he worked with on Billy and Mandy. That's all he really
Oh,
mentioned. Kept it real.
yeah. Well, pretty much with Robert's stuff, mm-hmm. It's all there. It's really, I guess really the only thing left for me to do was to just slug the storyboard for time. He was so detailed in his direction and his notes, and everything was covered. So it was like a godsend. It was just like wonderful for me to get one of his slugs, and to take it from there. And so that I always loved when he worked on the show, because Robert still to this day works on a lot of different shows. He's like a stalwart at Cartoon Network. I mean, he's the go-to guy for a lot of people, and so he was always kind of in and out of the rotation of directors on Billy and Mandy, and it was always good to have him on board. We had a supervising director, Julie, who also taught me a lot about the timing of the show. But we had a great crew in general, I think. I really kind of have to say, even working on The Simpsons and King of the Hill and later on other shows, I'd have to say both personally and professionally, Billy and Mandy was probably, up until the show I'm working on now at Disney, was I think the best time of my career.
Yeah,
we were a really tight-knit group. Maxwell Adams, aka Adam Burton, who was the creator of the show, great guy to work for, gave us a lot of room / rope to do our jobs, and it was a lot of fun. It was creatively very freeing for me in particular, and it just opened up the floodgates for me. And we were a tight group, and we would go out to lunch a lot together, and we would sometimes we would like piss off other crews at Cartoon Network, because we would have people come up and say, "You guys really don't get along all as well as you look, do you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we do." He says, "Bullshit." Because it's very rare when you end up on a crew that everybody gets along and everybody loves what they're doing and everybody loves the show that they're on. And so I don't know if that's what Robert was talking about, but for me, it wasn't without its ups and downs. But my 5-month job on Billy and Mandy turned into like 3 seasons of work until they finally put the kibosh on it, and I was able to move on to something else.
Yeah, I've only gotten the chance to talk to a few of you guys that have worked on there. You being one, and then Robert being the other. I've had Maxwell on. He was a fantastic person. We went pretty deep on his, because I didn't know before I started that chat, I didn't know what had happened towards the end of Billy and Mandy and Cartoon Network. So when I started looking into it and hearing what other fans were saying about the show, I was like, holy shit, man, this is I don't want to say it's some dark stuff, because there's a lot of worse stuff that's happened in the world, but it was like just hearing his side of the story and then hearing Robert's side, and then just doing the due diligence that I have of going and researching and finding out, what happened in between, the I don't want to say chain of custody, because it makes it sound like it's a trial or a court case, but it's just what happened in that time frame, in that timeline. It was just, wow, it's one of the biggest shows for Cartoon Network during that era. And then to just get the axe the way it did.
Yep.
And then you see the ushering in of a different slate of TV shows to, trying to compete with Disney and Nickelodeon and their realistic, non-cartoony type of shows. I was just shaking my head. I'm like, damn, I bet you if Cartoon Network had that one to redo, that they wouldn't have killed it as quickly as they did. And then, of course, the other person I had on from the Billy and Mandy was Grimm, Greg Eagles, which was that guy was hilarious, man. It was so it's always fun when I can talk that show. But one show in particular that I absolutely love, that I've never really gotten the chance to talk to in depth with, is King of the Hill. Now,
okay.
With King of the Hill, I just want to explain like how much this show meant to me. Like, this was like what The Simpsons were, and you worked on both of them, which is crazy to me, right? So what The Simpsons was for like 98% of the population of adult animation fans, what
Yeah,
King of the Hill is to me. I mean, that I don't know what it was. I was 12 years old when I first saw this show.
yeah,
Right. And I'm watching this and I'm like, I'm way too dumb to be watching this show for one. Being a 12-year-old, this is the first thing I'm thinking. And I'm like,
uh-huh.
two, it was the same thing as when I rewatched Samurai Jack as an adult. I was like, there's no way I could have appreciated either Samurai Jack or King of the Hill at 12 years old when I saw him the first time.
Mhm.
What was it like, or how did you get I guess, how did you get on King of the Hill is when it boils down to. I would love to know that story.
Yeah, sure. Well, one thing you have to understand is that both The Simpsons and King of the Hill were done at the same studio at the time. And the studio was Film Roman, and it was in North Hollywood. And The Simpsons were on the first floor, and King of the Hill was on the second floor. And when King of the Hill started up, there was a few Simpsons people that made the move upstairs, as I like to say. And by that time, I had worked my way up to being able to direct an episode of The Simpsons, and it was a really troubled show. I'll give you some quick background on that. Initially, the show was written for Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band to be the guest stars,
Mm-hmm.
because the showrunner at the time was a huge fan, and Bruce kept saying no, and they wouldn't take no for an answer, and they keep going back to him, and he would keep saying no. Well, this went on and on for months and months and months until it came time. Well, the show has to go into production, so we're going to start production on the show, but it's probably not going to be with Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, even though they're in the script and they're in the storyboard. So we started the show. Come to find out, there was a final no. And so then they went to, another list of people who also told them no. For some weird reason, they could not get anybody to do it, who eventually ended up doing the show, like, Tom Petty and the Stones and other people. But at that time, no one would replace Bruce Springsteen. So
Your apprehension was for him not
no,
wanting.
I never learned that, unfortunately, because I was always curious about that as well. So we had to stop production on the episode. So I'm basically kind of don't really have anything going on. So I had already done on my last hiatus from The Simpsons. I was assistant director on a really early, I think, season 1 episode of King of the Hill, Texas City Twister, where they get the tornado hits town, and they said, "Well, you can come up here, while you're on break from your Simpsons show, and we'll come on up and work with us." And so I went up, did some work on King of the Hill. They finally got the Who to agree to do the Simpsons show. So then I came back downstairs to the Simpsons, did that show, and then I had to go back up to King of the Hill because King of the Hill had taken me on by that point as a director. So
Freelance when you first start, is it if you're in the same studio, is it considered freelance if you're going to another show, or is it within the same studio?
No, it's within the same studio, but it's two different sets of budgets.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So when I if I work for King of the Hill, I get paid with the King of the Hill budget. If I work on Simpsons, I get paid off the Simpsons budget. So technically, if I'm not working on the Simpsons and not doing anything on the Simpsons, I'm not working. Mm-hmm. So if I go and work on King of the Hill, they pay me. That's how that would go. But they gave me my first full-time offer as a director on King of the Hill. Mm-hmm. So after I finished my Simpsons show, I just moved on to King of the Hill at that point and was a full-time director starting on season 2. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Now, you said it was the Texas Twister. Now, I can't remember because I always get these two mixed up, but there was a PSA at the end of the episode where Hank was talking about, the people seeing his ass cheeks. So was it that one, or where he had to wear the prosthetic pants because he was sitting on his spine essentially? But I think it was the Twister one where he had that PSA.
Probably that was probably done separately because I don't remember having to do that as part of the show.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was kind of a wacky show. But so the weird thing was I when I worked on The Simpsons, you know, The Simpsons was my first job in the animation business.
What a way to
And,
break in.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, no one's been luckier than I am. And so for me, my time on The Simpsons was basically, and I say this a lot, was basically my schooling. It was on my on-the-job training of how to do a animated television series. So I was able to really kind of work up the ladder into different aspects of animation production, to the point of eventually being able to direct an episode. And I kind of was able to use that to become a full-time director, because I don't, at that time, once I finished my Simpsons episode, there was no immediate plan at the time to have me go on to the directing roster full-time. Although they eventually did offer me a couple of more episodes to do, but by that time I was already pretty ingrained in King of the Hill as a director. So I just moved on to Arlen, Texas full-time. So
Which one was easier for you to get in the mindset for? Was it King of the Hill? Because you spent, I guess, I want to imagine it is because you'd spent a lot more time with, you know, King of the Hill and that cast and crew than you did with The Simpsons. Or did you, how many episodes did you work on for The Simpsons? Do you remember?
Total?
Yeah.
Oh God. Well, there's 7 seasons worth of episodes, but you know, I started out as a character layout artist.
Mhm.
So we would jump from episode to episode to episode to episode. I'd have to actually probably look at my own IMDb and figure out how many episodes that is. It's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, funny story. My wife and I were watching The Simpsons one night, and I said to her, I said, "Wow, I don't think I've ever seen this episode." And then when the end credits came on, there was my name. So that'll give you an idea of how many episodes that is. So
you got to think it's been going for what, 31, 32 years, somewhere around there. I mean, it was made the same year I was born. I'm 32. So 32 years it's been going.
yeah.
And it's funny. That was a show when I was younger. There was 2 cartoons I was not allowed to watch as a kid. The Simpsons being one, because my mom absolutely detested Bart Simpson. She didn't want her sons acting like Bart. And the other one was a show called Rugrats, because of a little girl named Angelica. And what's funny about that is I've actually had the voice actress for Angelica from Rugrats on, Miss Cheryl Chase, one of the sweetest and kindest people I have ever talked to in my life. And then I look at her, I'm like, you realize it's very, very confusing to talk to you. She's like, why is that? I was like, you were probably the sweetest and nicest person I've ever talked to in my life, but you played an evil tyrant. I was like, how did this happen? And then she told us the whole story about that. But yeah, it was those 2 shows specifically. And then I would have to wait until my mom went away so I could watch it. But during COVID in 2020, when everybody got sent home, we were just looking for stuff to watch, you know, because my son was sent home from school. My wife's work opened up. I work in the restaurant industry, so we were shut down for close to 6 months. And then my wife was working because she was a general manager of a store. So, you know, she was the only one working at the store. So she would come home on her lunch breaks and shit. And then me and my son were just burning through anything we could watch just to buy time and stuff. And we started on The Simpsons. And then I was like, wow, I forgot like how phenomenal, like how well the writing was, how well the voice acting was, the art, just everything. I mean, it's still, in my opinion, unpopular, I'm sure. It doesn't hold a candle to King of the Hill, but that's neither here nor there. You know, it was like, but just watching it with my kid, I'm like, man, I really don't understand why my mom didn't like it's a cartoon for one. But it was just like, I don't understand what her issue was with Bart. Like, obviously he's a little asshole, but I mean, all little boys at that age are assholes, right? So, you know, it was an interesting to kind of see it through a parent's eyes when you're watching a kid watch it, and then just not finding the same kind of issues that your parents had with it. But keeping it on King of the Hill for just a little while.
Sure.
So obviously each show is different. So some creators are very prominent with their shows, and some people are off doing stuff for the network, because once a show gets as big as one of those 2 shows did with Matt for Simpsons and Mike Judge for King of the Hill, they're pretty much, you know, I don't want to say they're out of loop, but they're definitely got more important shit to be doing there on a day-to-day basis. Was Mike in the room quite often? Was he in the studios often, or what was your experience like with him?
Yeah, my experience basically was more with Greg Daniels, was the co-executive producer and co-showrunner and creator of the show. with Mike. Mike, I actually only met face to face during my whole run, maybe twice,
Yeah.
because he was at that time based out of Texas, and the only time he would be in California, from what I remember, from what I recall, is that when his kids were on summer vacation, he'd bring the whole family out to California, and he'd spend the summer out here. And that's when he would either come to, take a peek at our animation studio, or he'd show up at the records. Most of his stuff was done remotely, at least by the time I came on board. But I did get a chance to kind of get to know him a little bit. There was a comedy festival down in where was it? Somewhere in Texas. You'll have to forgive me. But anyway,
it'll come to you right after you get off this call.
Of course. So they had a comedy festival down there, and King of the Hill was going to be a big part of it, and they had a screening of a couple of episodes, and one of them was mine at a huge theater down there. The voice cast came down. They had a King of the Hill day. And so then at the end of the King of the Hill day, we all kind of went out and partied. And that's where I kind of got a chance to kind of get to know Mike a little bit. He's a good dude, because years later, when I was at another studio in town here called Titmouse, and I'm talking years later, he was getting a tour of the studio because he was thinking about doing some work there, or having some work done there. And they poked his head in my office, and he remembered me. And I was actually very kind of touched by that, but didn't really get to know him too well. I dealt more or less with Greg Daniels.
So what was a day-to-day operation like for you specifically when you're working on King of the Hill? Because I got to imagine, depending on the show, it's every show is ramped up crazy. One of those shows that I just got to talk to another supervising director, and he worked on SpongeBob, the Camp Coral show, the Patrick Star show. So it was SpongeBob is one of those shows that he said when he got on it, he wasn't expecting the intensity to be where it was at, because it was just go, 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 because they were just burning out so many episodes of SpongeBob.
Yeah.
What was it like with you? Because you said Billy and Mandy was a little bit tighter because everything was punchier. It was like the Looney Tunes. It was a lot easier, I think is what you said, than the 30-minute sitcoms. So what is that process, and what is that day-to-day like for you on King of the Hill?
Well, the day-to-day on King of the Hill was, when you're working on shows like Billy and Mandy, where you're basically cranking out, me as a director I would basically have to get an episode out one every month, say on average. When you're directing in the primetime shows like King of the Hill, I would spend a whole season basically just directing 2 episodes. Because you're, as a director, I was involved in everything from soup to nuts, and A to Z. And I had a crew that worked for me. I had a crew of artists, character layout artists, that drew the characters and laid out the scenes. I had a crew of storyboard artists. I had a crew of designers that designed the characters, the backgrounds, the props. And I also had to storyboard 1 act of every show that I directed as well. So it's a process. It's a slower process, but it's not really any less intense. It's intense in its own way. There's a little bit more breathing room, thankfully, than working on cable shows. But you have to really kind of take the ball and run with it at the beginning of an episode when you storyboard it, and then you have to hand that into the showrunners and the supervisors, and you get notes on the storyboard, and then you come back and you revise those, and then you lay out the show and you build an animatic. Then you have to hand that in, and then you get notes on that. Then you have to revise that, and then you have to do all the final timing and all that stuff and ship it all overseas after approved designs. So it's it's a handful, but it's a different handful. I don't know if I'm being clear enough on this, but it's just a different handful. Plus, when you're dealing with the writing and the characters on a show like King of the Hill, whereas, they have a lot of knee slap humor going on, but they also have a lot of subtlety.
Yes.
And a lot of the subtlety is in character. And so, the hard thing to do is to kind of nail down the timing of the delivery of humor, and also nail down the acting within the character, acting on their faces, their body language, and things like that. We get to spend a lot more time doing that because we got to do full character layouts on that show, which is almost akin to animating, but not quite. But in a show like King of the Hill, yeah, there's a lot of subtlety that was kind of difficult at first to kind of nail down. But once I got familiar with the characters more and more, and it really kind of clicked better in my head about, okay, this is what the show's about. This is what this character is about. This is what we're trying to say in this episode. It became, I would say easier and a lot more fun.
So what was, because you said you had to storyboard and act, was there a specific part of the show that you tended to gravitate? Would you like to start it, end it, tie it in between?
Yeah, where would you go? That's a great question, because what I used to do is, because there's such an overlap of, even if I'm doing 2 episodes, while I'm starting a new one, I'm still doing the finishing touches on the previous episode. So depending on what my schedule was like and what my availability was to storyboard, I would either take the tail end of a show to storyboard, because that way I could still kind of concentrate on finishing up my previous episode, or I would take the first act, which is 3 acts in a storyboard for a half-hour show. I would take the first act, which is basically the setup of the show, and I would do that one. And then I would, have my heavy hitters in my storyboard department, just really kind of bring it home for Act 2 and Act 3.
Now, I don't think I've ever gotten the chance to ask him about this, because there's, like I said, I've never had anybody on for King of the Hill, but 2 questions really, but it might be just one. When you guys have a show like King of the Hill and each episode kind of leads into the next one, because you're going to it's like a comic book. There's story arcs, there's, blow off episodes and issues, yeah, and all the other stuff. So something's building into something. Is there a specific division inside the animation studios that you guys would go to, and they'd be like the little nerds with their pencils and like, oh, he can't say this because he said this 16 episodes ago, but he can't come here because he was here 4 episodes. Do you know what I mean? Does it look like a serial killer's lounge where they've got lines to every place? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. I would say yes and no to that. And I'll tell you what the yeses and what the nos are. We would actually get at the beginning of every season, and this would actually a lot of these notes would come from Mike Judge, at least way back in the beginning of the show, where we would have a lot of do's and don'ts, mostly things like, the way characters would act or the way characters would react. Hank does not do this, and Hank shouldn't do that, and Dale shouldn't do this, and so there was a lot of do's and don'ts, and that list grew and grew and grew every season. So to answer, that would be a yes, that there was someone who kept track of that stuff, but it usually started with Mike Judge. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of it would happen. A lot of it would also be followed up through by the writers of the episode, and it would be kind of up to us on our end at the animation studio and as directors to try and just keep track of all that stuff, because it would be brought to your attention if you did something that you weren't supposed to be doing, or that a character wasn't supposed to be doing.
Now, I'm pretty sure he's everybody's character, but Dale Gribble was definitely my guy. I still use, so not recently because I've just been so busy with the baby and work and everything like that, but each week my friends and I would play D&D, and we would play online because we're all in different states.
Sure.
So we would play on the computer, and we'd do the same thing like we're doing now. We'd get on the microphone, we'd talk shit about each other and talk shit to each other and just break balls the entire time. But I tried to bring in a Rusty Shackelfordism every single campaign. It was pocket sand. And then I would say, well, I'm going to roll for pocket sand. And I'd throw a little dice out there. He's like, no, asshole, you can't do that because you didn't put sand in it. I was like, well, Rusty Shackelford, you never saw him put sand in his pocket.
That's right.
But Dale Gribble, man, when you're writing this show, I got to imagine everybody's got their favorite characters, or everybody's got their favorite scenes, or everybody's got their favorite episodes.
Sure.
Specifically for you, did you have is it a propensity? No, that's not the right word. Did you have a bias or a lean towards a specific character or a specific group of characters that you absolutely loved working with, and you tried to get them in each episode?
Well, the thing is, as directors, we were just assigned scripts. Mm-hmm. So whatever happens in that story is what you're going to direct.
Gotcha.
So we really had no control over or really kind of a choice into what kind of stories we got as far as how they lean to a particular character.
Gotcha.
But you do develop your favorites, and quick and easy, Bobby Hill, became a lot of everybody's favorite character, and Bill Dauterive, of course, Hank and Dale. I mean, that's a given, but Dale and Bill and Bobby were like, I think for me, the big three, because I think they had the craziest storylines and the best lines and the best deliveries of lines, because I tried to make it a point as much as I could whenever I was going to direct an episode is to go to the recording session. And most times you don't really have the luxury of having all of the actors there at the same time. But, we would have a lot of that with King of the Hill, not all the time, but man, when they were all together or when most of them were together, I mean, it was hard for me not to laugh and maybe ruin a take. So, but yeah, I would say those three are probably my favorites.
Yeah, it's like I said, Dale was my guy, but when you think about it, there's not one bad character in this entire show. Every character, they might not have an episode every season, they might not have an episode every 2 seasons, but they do have a vast number of characters, and everybody seems to get their moment to shine, whether they're in there for 10 seconds, they're in there for 10 minutes. Yeah. And Bobby was one of those characters that I mean, he's pretty much why I wear the same shorts I've been wearing since I was 12. I still wear my cargo shorts. I don't wear pants. It's cargo shorts all day type of thing. Being in Florida, it's short weather almost.
Oh, there you go.
So,
yeah.
But him learning self-defense by the women's defense classes is still, I say it at least once a week. I don't know you. That's my purse.
That's my purse.
Depending on who it is, it's like they either get it and they're like, "Oh man, this guy's crazy as shit," or they like, "Oh, I like King of the Hill too." So,
yeah, it was funny when I first started on the show. I would talk to a lot of people, that because I'm originally from Connecticut, and so if I was ever back in Connecticut or talking to people from Connecticut, and they wanted to know, hey, what are you working on these days? And because they all knew I was on The Simpsons originally, I said, well, I'm not on The Simpsons anymore, because at that time King of the Hill was only not even in its second season yet. And so a lot of people, at least the reactions I got, weren't really aware of it yet, So I would say, yeah, well, I worked on The Simpsons for a long time, but now I'm on a show called King of the Hill. And they would go, oh, I love The Simpsons. It's just kind of like, really, come on, but then that changed over time.
Yeah.
That changed over time. And then, King of the Hill hit its stride and, became what it was. And then I didn't have to hear that any longer, I do have a story akin to what you were talking about with, running off Bobby Hill lines. I did an episode on Billy and Mandy called Attack of the Clowns. And there's a long stretch in that episode where Billy is convinced, and he's trying to convince Mandy that they're going to be invaded by clowns, evil clowns, from outer space. And he said, they're going to destroy us all. And he just keeps repeating, destroy us all, yes, over and over and over and over. And it just goes on and on and on and on. So eventually they made t-shirts out of that. And it was just, Billy's face, and it just says destroy us all under it. So I was standing in line at Ralph's, which is a supermarket chain out here. And there was a woman in front of me with her baby in the cart, and she's staring at my shirt. And I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. And she's staring at my shirt, and she's looking at me, and she's staring at my shirt, and she looks up at me and she goes, you work on that show? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, I hate that show. And I'm like, sorry. She says, that's all my kid would run around the house screaming, destroy us all, destroy us all. I couldn't get him to stop. And I'm like, sorry. So anyway, Just a
I like that because did you ever watch a show? It was on Cartoon Network around the same time Billy and Mandy was. Do you remember a show called Ed, Ed and Eddie?
Oh yeah.
So I've had almost the complete cast and crew of that entire show almost, right? So
Cool.
I've gotten the chance to see everybody's perspective on what they were doing, how they were doing it, what they would love to do, what they hated to do, right? So I've spent so much time in that universe that one of the writers that I've had on more than any other person, Mike Kubat, fantastic person, one of the funniest people I've ever met too, was telling me the story because I always had this. I love the thought of people reading fan mail, but it's hate mail.
Yes.
I can't remember the late night host to do it, but he would make the celebrities read mean tweets. And then I
Yes.
had the thought, I'm like, you ever see that segment? He was like, yeah, I've seen it. I was like, do you guys ever have that? Like, you guys would be sitting around the animator's room or the writer's room, and you guys would read off shitty fan mail. And he's like, yeah, we did. And he was like, what was the worst one you ever had? He was like, it wasn't even a fan mail. They were in my car. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And then he was like, well, I was the dad that was driving my daughter to her soccer game. And we would carpool. So a bunch of the team was in there and a bunch of the parents. He was like, I'm in there. I think he said he was like, I was driving a big old Suburban. And he's like, I had some of the other girls from the team and then some of the parents in there. And then everybody that was in there, with the exception of his daughter and maybe one or two of his friends, didn't know what he worked on. They knew he worked in animation. They just didn't know he worked on Ed, Ed and Eddie. Right. And the show Ed, Ed and Eddie came up. And then the mom was back there, and then he's driving, and he says he keeps looking up in the rearview mirror, and then she's like, I fucking hated that show. And then he made eye contact with his daughter, and she went, no, don't say anything.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to see like where people hear their criticism, and it's people are just emboldened and brave, He's like, man, show. So
I get that. I also had another time when someone was asking me when I was working on The Simpsons, we would have a hiatus every year in between seasons. So I would always end up with at least, 3.5 months off in between seasons. And so someone asked me, well, what do you do during that time? I said, well, I try and get freelance work, or I said, but I know I'm going to be returning back to the show. So I usually just collect unemployment, if I can. And she got really like insanely angry with me about the fact that, I was like bilking the system for unemployment, and I'm like, look, this is just what happens in my line of work. This is, besides, I pay into this. This is my money anyway. So what's your problem? You know what I mean? Oh my God. Yeah. It happens all the time.
It's always interesting to see where, like I said, where people hear what and when they hear what. But before we kind of transition into a couple of the other shows,
sure.
Favorite episode that you worked on, and maybe favorite episode that you didn't work on, but you absolutely loved nonetheless.
Of King of the Hill.
Yeah.
My favorite episode that I worked on was an episode called Hank's Cowboy Movie, where he takes Bobby to the Cowboys training camp in Wichita Falls. And yeah, that's my favorite of the ones that I got to direct.
Marlin sucks.
And I worked really, really hard in that one. That one really kind of just struck some kind of creative chord in me, and I really kind of just went above and beyond in that episode. But I love the way it came out. And I think favorite episode I didn't work on, that's a tough one because there's a lot of good ones. There's a lot of good ones, but I would probably have to say the one we were talking about before with Bobby taking self-defense. I mean, that's just killer. That's really just a killer episode. Yeah.
Yeah. There's one last question. Well, not one last question, because I'm pretty sure there'll be a couple more for King of the Hill coming up. Sure. There was a rumor, I want to say last year before last, that King of the Hill might be coming back. Did you hear anything about that? And then
I did. I heard a lot of buzz about that, of it getting rebooted and coming back up. But I think nothing ever really became of that, because I know Mike Judge in particular, he's developing something new right now. I think it's in process of being worked on, but I'm not sure. But yeah, nothing ever kind of followed up after that initial announcement that there was a possibility of King of the Hill. But who knows? I have no idea. It still may be in the works. You just never know. So, but I have no definitive kind of answer for you, unfortunately.
And I would love to see it come back, even if it's just for one more season. I mean,
Yeah.
a couple people that have passed away.
Yeah.
Was it Brittany Murphy? Being Luann, and then of
Yeah.
course, Lucky being Tom Petty. But I mean, it's just, I feel like especially with how that show ended in this 12th season, it really, I just want one more season is really what I'm getting at. Even if we don't get it, I mean, I would love to just speculate and think about what we could get for a final season.
Sure.
I know they were talking about rebooting Beavis and Butthead again for the third time, which don't get me wrong, I loved Beavis and Butthead, but it's just like there's something, like I said, it was magic with King of the Hill. There was not one dull episode, not one. I mean, I'm pretty sure, working on it, you can find any kind of, error. But as a fan watching this on a week to week, on a day to day basis, I mean, my day, I mean, it's pretty sad that I can remember this, but I can tell you, like, as a kid, what channels my shows came on and what time they came on and where I was. Like, if I was coming out of school, and from the animation domination block is what they used to call it in Fox.
Yep.
For my area, it would start at 5:30, 6 o'clock would be the first episode of King of the Hill, 6:30 Simpsons, then another episode, which was the new episode of King of the Hill that they played the previous week. And then it would go into the new episode of Simpsons and Family Guy and then American Dad and all. Very sad is what I'm getting at, Sean. Like I looked forward to that time, specifically growing up, because it was like, I felt like I was learning something watching this. I felt like I was getting smarter by watching this show, because it was a show that was different than anything else that I'd ever seen before. And I don't want to say anything I've seen since, but when I think about it, there's not very many shows that get 12 seasons, but there's not very many shows that get 12 seasons and could have went for another 12 more.
Exactly.
It definitely was one of those shows that left you wanting more. I'm pretty sure there's, yourself included, as much fans as we have, as far as that fan base goes, can echo that same sentiment. Do you have a favorite line from that show that's my purse?
Yeah. I don't want to paraphrase. I'm going to try and get it the way I at least remember it. I think Hank and Bobby are in the car, and Bobby, I guess, had fallen in love with a plastic mannequin head or something like that at one point. And I think he's trying to talk him. Hank's trying to, explain to him about, being a little weird. And Hank says, I'm pretty sure that, it's illegal in like at least 28 states to fall in love with a plastic head. Just for that just killed me, that line. And again, it's probably paraphrasing, but I think that's my favorite line, I think.
Yeah, that was the episode where Luann brought home the head because she was trying to get her
beauty school,
beauty salon license, and then
that's right.
Oh, I'll learn how to kiss by kissing the mannequin head.
Yeah, that's right.
That show is probably the only show, like, I very rarely can I go super nerdy on specific cartoons and shows, because I've got such if you look behind me, I've got such a vast interest in so much shit, right? So trying to pinpoint, but with the exception of this show, I just rewatched it again in its entirety last year. So it's definitely, I can pull out, and I've watched like almost every episode 3 or 4 times. A very sad life, Sean, again, is what I'm getting at. So
that's all right. That's all right. No worries, man.
But transitioning a little bit to the studio, same studio but separate floor, man, The Simpsons. Before I get to that, how close, because you said Billy and Mandy, you guys were very, very close knit when it came to the crew that was working on it. Was it the same concept with King of the Hill? Was that crew pretty close, or was it segmented?
Well, we were a tight crew, but it was a big crew. It was a big crew, and we had a lot of directors, so that meant a lot of crews. But we all had fun, and we all got along. I just think as a smaller entity, the Billy and Mandy crew was just a little bit more personalized, because it was just a smaller group of people, tight knit. But King of the Hill, we were all very friendly. We had a good time, and we enjoyed ourselves. The same thing in The Simpsons too. Simpsons, again, another huge crew, but we would all, not all of us, because it was just too many people, but we we would go to lunch together a lot, groups of us, and we all had a good time at work. And again, it was all because we were all there for the same reason, and we enjoyed working on the show.
Was that probably the biggest studio, or not studio, excuse me, I keep saying that. Was that probably the biggest team you worked on, was The Simpsons?
Yeah, I believe The Simpsons was a little larger than King of the Hill. I could be wrong. I don't really know the exact number.
Yeah.
But it's a big crew. Yeah.
Now, how many episodes are you guys running it? Like specifically just for, obviously they're different shows, but Simpsons and King of the Hill, how many shows are you guys running at the same time? Because I know you said that you guys would, finishing one to roll into the next, but do you remember like how many episodes you guys would be doing consecutively or congruently with each other?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, it was on average, it was about 24 episodes a season, and there was usually a crew of between, at least on King of the Hill, I think there was 11 directors on staff. But it was a varying degree of how many shows each director would do. Like I was a 2-show director. There was a lot of 2-show directors, but there were also 3-show directors, and there were some 1-show directors. So it all worked out that between all of us, there would be your 24 episodes. And I think the same thing happened on the Simpsons as well.
Now, with just seniority, would you get more episodes, or?
You kind of, well, I would say that's partly true. And I would say that you would kind of have to earn the luxury of being a 3-show director, because 3-show directors were the top tier. And to become a 3-show director, yeah, you really had to earn it up from being a 2-show director. I never quite got there. So I was always a 2-show director.
That's okay. Like I said, King of the Hill was a better show. But staying on The Simpsons for just a little while.
Sure.
So you didn't have too many, run-ins and dust-ups with Mike, getting to meet him, and you said you had a little personal meeting when you guys went and partied for the King of the Hill party.
Yep.
King of the Hill Day. Did you get to meet Matt at all, or what was that experience like working with the producers and the executive producers, and of course Matt like?
Yeah, well, you have to understand one thing is that the actual animation work on the show at our studio is in one part of LA, and then Matt and the writers and the producers are in another part of LA, and very rarely did the two intertwine with each other. Yeah. Usually when that would happen is when, as a director or even as an assistant director, you would go with your director to go over to Fox, which is out on the west side of LA, and from North Hollywood, where our studio was, to go screen your show that you're doing, either an animatic or the actual animation that has just come back from overseas. And that's when I would get a chance to meet everybody and sit with everybody and kind of, work back and forth with everybody. I liked Matt a lot, but I was warned when I was first became an assistant director by my director. He says, now look, when we get over there to screen the show today, there's a pecking order to how you sit, where you sit, and don't say anything unless I say something first. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. So, but then after a while, that kind of got loosened up a little bit once they get used to you and you're not such a newbie anymore. But, mostly the show is run by the executive producer, who's really like the big top writer of the show. They run pretty much the day-to-day of the show on their end. Matt always had the ability to sign off on things or not sign off on things. I mean, he was very involved, but again, because we were in 2 different parts of LA, we very rarely saw each other unless it was a premiere party every season, so there wasn't a lot of interaction going on.
Did you guys do, I hear, all the time about, I don't know if you got to meet him when you were there, but Van Partible was the creator of Johnny Bravo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So, he would say like they would do parties all the time at Cartoon Network. They would have, somebody's birthday, or they would throw together some kind of random day for a holiday type of thing. They
Yep.
always try to keep it fun and festive at Cartoon Network. Was
Yeah.
it like that at Fox? Would you guys, would they throw parties? Were you guys just knee deep in writing and trying to animate as much as possible?
No, not you, because again, we weren't really part of Fox. The studio that where we did the animation, or we actually produced the animation for the show, totally separate from Fox. So the only time again where we would party as one unit would be usually a premiere party.
Would you guys try to do stuff like that for the animation studio? Would you guys try to do stuff like that as like a morale building, or what would you guys do to bond? I guess is what I was really getting at.
Oh, we would do crazy things like we would do we would actually do like whenever a big movie just came out or something that we all had gone to see.
Mm-hmm.
We would start drawing scenes from that movie with the Simpsons characters, and we would post them up on the walls. And I remember one was right around the time that Pulp Fiction had come out, and we did scenes from Pulp Fiction with Simpsons characters in place of the actors, and that was really cool. And again, like I said, we would go out to lunch a lot. Halloween was a big time where we would party a lot because the costumes were unbelievable, and we would always have a in studio Halloween party, and then obviously Christmas time. But that would be it really. But yeah, Cartoon Network, they used to have, especially during the summer, we would have I don't know if it was a monthly barbecue on the roof of the studio, and yeah, there was always something going on there. Yeah.
Now, I'm glad you brought up Halloween, because if you wouldn't have mentioned it, I wouldn't have brought it up. But that's my favorite holiday.
Uh-huh.
Being a fat kid growing up, I absolutely loved the thought of going door to door, knocking on door, saying trick or treat, and they give you candy. Man, Line me the fuck up, man. It was my day to shine.
Yeah, what's better than that? Yeah.
That's not much, man. I mean, if you ask my wife, it's Christmas, but we don't talk about that shit. But Halloween is a very, very big time for the Simpsons, because everybody look forward to those Halloween episodes in that Halloween season. Did you ever get to direct or work on any of those episodes?
I worked as a character layout artist on I think one of them. Mm-hmm. And I'll have to apologize because I can't remember which one it was. Okay. But yeah, it was always fun to get assigned to working on the Halloween show, because it wasn't just one episode. It was all these little vignettes. Yes. And a lot of them were always kind of takeoffs on classic horror films, or Simpsons versions of classic horror films. So it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I did get to work on one, possibly two. And I also got to work on a couple of couch gags too, which were also very fun. So yeah, had its perks.
Oh, I can imagine. Same kind of questions we did for King of the Hill that we'll do for The Simpsons. Was there a character, not so much that you absolutely loved, or as far as your favorite characters, but drawing, did you feel like you slipped into those characters, like slipping into a pair of socks? Was it easy to slip into one or two of them?
Oh yeah, I mean most of them, because you have to know how to draw all of them, because when you get assigned a section of scenes to do, I mean you have to draw who's ever in those scenes. Yeah. But I think for me, I love drawing Homer, but I really got an affinity for drawing Grandpa Simpsons. He was a lot of fun to draw, because he was kind of like this weird Simpsons version of, like, to me, it was like a weird Simpsons version of Zippy the Pinhead, and he had like his pineapple hair up on top of his head, and he was just a lot of fun, and I enjoyed drawing him as a character. I also enjoyed drawing what was the other one? Grandpa, Mr. Burns. I like drawing a lot. He was fun. Actually, I think they put out a book a few years ago of how to draw the Simpsons, and my section of it was how to draw Mr. Burns, because I really did enjoy drawing him. So
fun character to watch.
I did that for the book, but they're actually all fun to draw. The only difficulty was getting Lisa Simpson's hair correct, because she's got all those points in her hair, and she has a certain amount of points, and they all have to hit a certain angle, because if they don't, it looks like hell. You know what I mean? So I always had trouble with her.
Now, with the exception of Lisa's hair, was there any other characters that kind of threw you for a loop, or might have been difficult to really play with?
Um, I guess whenever we would have a celebrity guest star that was playing a character, but we had to design it to kind of look like that person, because sometimes when you Simpsonize some people, you can get a good likeness even looking as a Simpsons character, and other ones not so much, and it's kind of tough to kind of keep those characters on model so that they kind of at least look like who's portraying them. So that's kind of the only difficulty I ever had.
Now, did you ever hear, and you might have not heard this, it'd probably be like one of those guys at the higher echelon of the food, those producers, you'd hear like, oh man, I don't like, they made me look too big or they made me look too thin. But did you ever hear any of the celebrity guests say, nah, I don't really like your design of me?
Well, yeah, I usually get it, third or fourth person removed. But I used to do a lot of freelance art based on the show for Fox. And there was an episode where John Waters was the guest star. And so I had to draw a publicity drawing of John and Homer. And so I had John behind Homer, wrapping his arms around Homer, and Homer kind of freaking out like that. And I had heard that, oh no, John would never hold anybody like that, So I had to redraw it. Basically, is what happened. But you don't hear it directly. It always comes from somebody else. So
when do you start hearing, or when do you guys start hearing at the studios and the animation studios you're working at, Simpsons did it? Yeah, there was, for when I was growing up, Simpsons, Family Guy, South Park, they were really fighting for dominance. And maybe that's just fans looking at it, or maybe the media playing into it. But you always had that group of people like, oh, I don't like South Park, but I like Family Guy. I don't like Family Guy, but I like the Simpsons. I don't like Simpsons, but I like this. So everybody had their favorite.
Yep.
Did you guys see that in the animation studios you were working in, that we got to try to compete with South Park, we got to try to compete with Family Guy, or were you guys just focused on doing your own thing, being the
yeah? I think it was more us being focused on what we were working on. Because really, in a weird sort of way, yeah, that stuff does exist. But when another show becomes popular and another show becomes popular and another show becomes popular, in general, that's all good for the animation industry. So you can have your personal taste and you can say, well, I don't particularly care for it, but but we're just so slammed and so busy doing our jobs on whatever show we were working on, especially being the Simpsons at this point, that it was always a discussion about it. But as far as like taking sides and stuff like that, yeah, a lot of that happened, but it never really kind of
never filtered down to you guys.
It never like became a thing. No.
So you guys weren't like greasers out in the back snapping your fingers.
Yeah, the Jets and the Sharks. Yeah, no, not really, not really. No, because a lot of time, you'll be working. First of all, it's very unusual to work long term on a show anyway in our business. There's very few shows that really go on and on and on and on, and so eventually, at some point, you'll be working with somebody on The Simpsons who may now be working on Family Guy or maybe American Dad or whatever. And so you're just happy for them that they got a gig, you know what I mean? And, it's always easy, and it's probably a good thing to do that, you're a good cheerleader for whatever show you're working on anyway, but yeah, no, nothing ever trickled down to us that I can remember.
Okay. And then the last question for The Simpsons. And you might have, if I ask you this question, you might have to kill me. But who at the studios is the time? Who's going back in time and forward in time and telling us all this stuff that's going to happen in The Simpsons? Who's the time traveler in The Simpsons? Because The Simpsons is what's it called? They've predicted the future, if you will, quite a few times throughout the year.
Yeah.
Who in the studios is the time traveler? Can you tell me, Sean?
No, I can't, because I don't know.
Guarded secret. Gotcha. Wink, guarded secret. Wink.
Yeah. I can't tell you. uh no, yeah, it's funny though, because it's so true. uh and you know how bizarre everything is going on in the world right now anyway, that you know we would have those things even happening on the Simpsons 20, 30 years ago. But yeah, you know, it's the writers really, you know, it's just they throw it at the wall and see what sticks, you know.
Um, I think it was Robert. One of my favorite story, one of my favorite stories, and I think it was the night that he got his first Emmy, or it might have been. I think he might have gotten two Emmys in one night. I can't remember,
He probably did, no, Robert.
but it was, and it was oh, fuck, it was either the Samurai Jack one or it was the Star Wars one, but the Simpsons crew had thought they were going to win it, so they were up there, and then they called Samurai Jack or they called Clone Wars, whatever it was.
Yep.
And he was like, the Simpsons crew just left. They said fuck it and left. They weren't sticking
Yeah.
around for anybody else. And I was like,
Yeah.
really? He was like, yeah. He was like, they won everything that night, or they won everything the year before, and they got super upset because we won one thing. And I was like, how'd that feel? He's like, awesome.
Yeah, that happened to me one time. I was directing on Penguins of Madagascar at Nickelodeon, and we were up against the Simpsons in one of the categories, and we won. And by the time we came down off stage after collecting our Emmys, yeah, all the Simpsons people were gone. So we were sitting right across the aisle from them, and yeah, so it's weird. It's weird, but hey, it happens. You know what I mean?
And then you can't win them all,
Nope.
unless you're Michael
Nope.
Jordan, and then you win them all, and then you retire.
Yeah,
Uh,
there you go.
but I'm so glad you brought that one up because I completely forgot about that. The Penguins of Madagascar. That was, now I know you worked on the TV show,
Yeah.
but the movie, like, I don't know what it was about that movie or when it hit. I want to say I was like 16, 17, somewhere around there when that movie came out. Maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit younger. I can't really remember. But the penguins were my favorite part about that entire movie. And then
Yeah.
they get their own TV show, Smile and
Yeah.
Wave Boys. It was just Rico, you know, it was just Cheetos. It was all this crazy zany. It was so whimsical. It was so fun. I mean, what was that like working at Nickelodeon? So obviously you'd worked at Fox with Simpsons and King of the Hill.
Yeah.
Then I'm assuming it had to have come after Billy and Mandy. But were you working on at Nick after Billy and Mandy?
Yeah, because while I was at when I finished up Billy and Mandy at Cartoon Network, I had moved on. Pretty much the whole Billy and Mandy crew had moved on to a show called Chowder.
Oh, yeah.
And so because Carl Greenblatt, who created that show, was one of our board artists on Billy and Mandy, so we all went to work for him. And while I was there, I had directed a short for another one of our Billy and Mandy alumnus, Eric Robles. He had a short that he wanted me to direct at Nickelodeon, and so I did. And then it went to series. I got picked for series, and so he asked me to come over and join the crew. And so I did. I spent 5 years at Nick, and then from there I went to a studio called Titmouse, and I worked on one of the very early Disney XD shows. Remember Disney XD?
Oh, yeah.
And it was a show called Randy Cunningham, Ninth Grade Ninja. And I worked there about 4 years. And that was a fun show. That was a really, really fun show to work on. And it was kind of my foray into Disney, actually, because I was kind of really lucky enough to kind of utilize my time on that show at Titmouse to kind of get in the door at Disney. And that's where I am now.
So with I'm going to use a wrestling reference. Did you ever watch wrestling back in the day?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. Okay, so the goal for, and I'm not a wrestler, but you know, this is just what I've heard from, you know, listening to other wrestlers podcasts and all this other shit. Everybody's goal for the most part back in the 80s, 90s, you know, even early 2000s, everybody wanted to make it to the WWE. Connecticut based company right there.
Yes, that's right.
WWF and then WWF and then WWE, you know,
Yeah.
so the goal was to always make it to the WWE.
Yep.
I got to imagine for a lot of animators, the House of Mouse is the WWE. Everybody wants to make it to the House of Mouse because of those iconic characters, that stable of characters that you get to play with, that sandbox, if you will, that most people get to play with.
Yeah. Yeah.
is just, it's monumental for a lot of people. I mean, for me specifically, I mean, I'm a Cartoon Network guy through and through. But, you know, just over the last few years, getting a little bit older and going back and rewatching a lot of those Disney movies that I watched when I was younger, but watching them now with my kids and getting to
Yeah.
see through their eyes, you know, and then see
Yeah.
how they take and see what they take away from it. And
Yep.
one of the funnest things I get to do, even if that's a word, most fun, funnest, I don't even know if that's a fucking word,
That's all right.
is get to watch movies with my oldest son. He's starting to get to the age where he doesn't really want to watch movies with dad anymore, which is perfectly fine. I've got a 6-month-old in training, you know, so
There you go.
you know, he'll eventually slide into that spot.
How old is your son?
What's that? Oh, he just turned 12 last Wednesday.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's starting to get to that age where I was at, where I didn't want to be around, you know, my mom and stuff like that.
Yep.
Which is it happens, you know, it's nothing.
Yeah.
It's just life. But getting to see that, you know, kind of through his eyes, especially with the Disney movies, because we had almost every single, we were so lucky when it came to movies when we were growing up. We had almost every single Disney VHS.
Uh-huh.
Ladies and gentlemen, VHS was a little tape you had to put in there, and you had to hit rewind in the VCR. And it wasn't the streaming shit that they got now. You hit play, and you had to be kind, and you had to rewind when you dropped
Absolutely.
a blockbuster. But, you know, getting to see that through his eyes. But was it, do most artists, or for you specifically, did you have that inclination that, like, man, I want to make it to the House of Mouse one day, or did this one kind of come out of left field?
Yeah, no, it didn't come out of left field. But yes, that has always been a desire of mine from the moment I decided to come out here to California to pursue, you know, animation. When I first came out, I mean, I was at a stage where, you know, I was willing to do whatever I could do just to get into a studio, even if it meant sweeping the floors and emptying the trash bins, you know. But yeah, for me, I think at one point I kind of wanted to become a feature animator, you know, work on a Disney feature. But, you know, all of my career has been in television. And I just got so used to that way of working that it's just stayed in television. And then, you know, when I was able to, you know, go to Disney TV animation, yeah, I grabbed at the opportunity to do it because it's still Disney, you know, no matter what, you know. So yeah, I mean, for me, yeah, that is like, for me, the pinnacle, really, you know.
Studio that started it all, really.
I'm sorry.
It's essentially the studio that really started it all. I mean,
Yeah,
we wouldn't have what we have now without, I mean, you had Fleischer Studios, you had all these other studios that were coming up before them, but nothing was really doing feature films like Disney did. I mean, and then you start digging into the history of Disney, you're like, holy shit, this place shouldn't exist with what they went through and what they had to go through just to survive. You know, those wartime films were crazy.
Yep. And I think too, it also, it's probably, you know, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I think probably it was more so people of my generation where strove for that. Disney, you know, got to work, you would love to work for Disney, but there's so many different opportunities now and so many different places to work your trade and work your skills that I'm not quite so sure that's the pinnacle. You know what I mean? But I'm sure it is for a lot of people. You know, I'm thrilled to be there, and I've been there for 5 years now. So,
what's your favorite? So we'll break it up into three. But
okay.
What's your favorite classic? And what we'll do is, I'm horrible with eras, so we can do, you know, let's say I think, what was it, 39 is when Snow White came out, 39, 38, somewhere around there. Because I know both Dumbo and Pinocchio dropped before we were attacked in Pearl Harbor. The only reason I know this is because I'm a Navy guy, so I'm a World War II nut when it comes to, you know, Pearl Harbor. And you're not supposed to have a favorite war, but my favorite thing to read about when it comes to war is that specific area or that specific era. So, you know, going from, let's say, 39 to 70, you know, so you had Snow White, you had Dumbo, you had Pinocchio, all the way up to, I think, Robin Hood, maybe. So from that initial maybe 30 years, you got a favorite movie as far as Disney goes?
Yeah, I do actually, and it's a combination of one of the earlier ones and one of the later ones. The earlier one being Fantasia, because it was just, moving art.
That's a great one to smoke a joint to, by the way.
There you go. Yeah. And then later, hands down for me, it really resonated with me when I was a kid, was a Jungle Book. And I'll tell you well, I'll tell you why, because from an artistic standpoint, I loved the graphic look of everything, and how you can almost see hints of the animators underdrawings on the cells, and plus those beautiful backgrounds, and the characters were just awesome. So yeah, so it would be Jungle Book and Fantasia for me.
Mine is not so much Fantasia, but the Jungle Book is my favorite Disney character. So I can never say just Disney character. So I always got to say hero and bad guy. My favorite Disney character has always been Baloo. I love that bear so much. He was so fun. He was just the whole, like that movie. I'm getting all choked up here talking about Jungle Book. That movie specifically. I mean, the first dog I ever bought as an adult. I still have him. I bought him. I didn't buy. I adopted him. We adopted a rescue pit bull.
Oh, that's cool.
He was a puppy when we got him. He's 13 this year, and a couple weeks, 13 or 14. I can't remember. It's just all these years starting to blend together. But I named him Louie after King Louie from the Jungle Book. Yeah. But Baloo specifically, he's always been my favorite, Disney hero or character. And then favorite villain was always Captain Hook from Peter Pan. He always dressed so snazzy. Him and just me. It was TikTok Croc. It was just so fun. So it was always not a toss up, because the Jungle Book always took it, but Jungle Book and Peter Pan, I just absolutely loved. TikTok Croc, and then Captain Hook and Mr. Smee.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that was Peter Pan was my oldest daughter's favorite movie when she was a girl.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how many times I must have sat through that with her. But I agree with like what you said earlier, that once you have children, you start re-watching the things that you watched when you were a kid, and you're seeing them differently because now you're seeing them through their eyes, and it's a whole different, I wouldn't say new experience, but a different experience.
Yeah.
And so I saw a lot of Peter Pan.
Yeah, that's my son's, like, because we started going back, and there's this great podcast. I don't know if you listen to too many podcasts, but there's this great one, and it's by a guy named Andy DiGenova and Michael Lyons and Hunter Fagan, I think is their names. The first two for sure. One of them's a animation writer for, I think it's Animation Magazine or Cartoon Research. I can't remember which one it is. So I apologize, Michael. They do this podcast. It's called Disorder. And what they did was, it was like 3 or 4 years ago, they started watching every single Disney movie in order from when it was released. And they would tell you things about the production schedule, the art, the animators, the voice actors, just all this really, really cool stuff. And listening to that, I was like, fuck, I really need to start going back and rewatching these, because they would talk about specific scenes, or they would talk about issues that the animators would have, or the writers would have, or the voice actors would have. And then you would hear like all these stories. And then I started going back and rewatching them. I'm like, oh man, I forgot like how just beautiful, like the scene in Pinocchio specifically, like we're talking about Pinocchio for just a second, but Pinocchio, where all of this stuff was not done on a computer. None of this stuff was done on a computer. Every, just the water scenes in the oceans were all drawn and painted by hand. Just to think that they had not the foresight, because they were really learning as they went type of thing, because they had to figure out how to do this stuff. So painting water and doing all of this stuff made me appreciate it so much. This seems to be the appreciation podcast, but it made me appreciate like what they had to do damn near 80 years ago. It's just phenomenal what they did with the ingenuity and what they came up with. I mean, like I said, that studio, for what it's worth, me being a fan, I absolutely love that studio, and that's some of the greatest movies of all time coming out of there.
Yeah.
But going past Jungle Book, and what's crazy about Jungle Book, I don't know if you know this, that movie was the last movie that was made by Walt Disney Studios, where Walt was still, well, he wasn't alive when it came out. He died 9 months before it came out. Sadly, I wish he would have gotten to see that one, because I really appreciate it. Another good one, and I didn't appreciate it until I saw. It's not that I didn't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate it as much as what I'm getting at until I talked to Robert about it. But we talked 101 Dalmatians, and I
Uh-huh.
just rewatched that one for like the fourth or fifth time in the last 2 or 3 weeks because my oldest wanted to watch it, and then the youngest one, he's only 6 months, but we've got 4 dogs at home. So anytime the dogs come over, he absolutely loves me. I've got 2 huskies, so he grabs them by the
Oh,
face.
wow.
He loves walking me. He does this, and the dogs absolutely love him. So anything with dogs, he's just cuckoo for. So we
Sure.
put on 101 Dalmatians, and his eyes were just lighting up, and he was looking at all the puppies and stuff. So that's another great one. But past Jungle Book, man, what do you got? So that's like, let's say 70s to mid 90s.
Um,
You got the Lion King, what they would call the Renaissance or
yeah,
the
the Renaissance.
rebirth.
Yeah. Yeah,
Lion
I was a little late coming on board to the Renaissance, to be honest with you. I was never really a fan of Little Mermaid. I liked The Lion King. You know what I really liked, and I guess I'm in the minority here, but I really liked Hercules.
Yeah,
I just loved the design of it, the way everything was designed, and also, can't beat James Woods as a villain. You know what I mean? So,
can't be good either. So
and they did a fantastic job animating him. What else? Let me think. Nothing really else. I did like their foray back into 2D for a while there with the Princess and the Frog. I really enjoyed that.
that one was a beautiful one. That's as far as modern day goes. That's not like the Frozen CG. Princess and the Frog. That movie is so fun.
Yeah, yeah. So that's about it, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm another one of being in the minority for liking a movie that most people don't. The Great Mouse Detective is one of my
Oh, yeah.
go-to. I absolutely love it. It's
Yeah.
because of Radigan and Fidget,
Yes.
and it's just when I talk to, I don't know if you ever gotten to work with him or you talked to him. Chris Bailey, he's an animator. He's worked at Disney for a little while.
I know who that is, but
Yeah.
no, I've never met him. Yeah.
So he did a little bit of work on that, and he was telling me, he's like, well, the reason you like that movie is because of Vincent Price. And I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, he embodied Radigan. He was the reason that everybody went to see that movie. And he, and since then I've heard other people talk about The Great Mouse Detective, but that one was a fun one as well. And
Sure.
So what about Pixar? You got a favorite Pixar movie?
Hmm. A lot of them are so good. Um, I would probably have to say most of the Toy Stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, I'm kind of a fan of the Cars movies only because my youngest daughter was a Cars fanatic, and I've again saw that a million times.
We burnt that DVD out 3 times. Did you know you could burn DVDs out? I burnt VHSs out when I was a kid. I burnt the original Ninja Turtles movie out, and then Dumb and Dumber, and my mom wouldn't buy Dumb and Dumber ever again.
Yeah, no, I didn't know you can burn DVDs out, but I believe
They
it.
quit working. Yeah, they quit working.
Okay,
So
yeah, that makes sense.
all it takes is for you to have to drive from Florida to San Diego. We got stationed in San Diego, and we lived out in Florida. So I would deploy, and then my wife would take on the car because we only had one car at that time.
Yeah.
And whenever I came back, she had to buy one because she had to work, and I was still out in California. She had to stay in Florida. So she drove the car out, and she drove it and drove it back, and then drove it and drove it back. And then I think on the second time is when the Cars DVD broke. So she had to make a pit stop to get a Cars DVD because the kid's like maybe 3, and that's all he was watching. That Spooky Buddies, which is the Air Bud Golden Retriever. That was the Halloween one, and then another one he was super fascinated with was a movie called Rio. I don't know if you remember that one.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Those ones specifically, he really made my wife just hate having a DVD player in the car.
Yeah, I get that big time.
All right.
I think also I was a fan of the last few Pixar films. I mean, because it seems like they've got such a lock on telling a great story. They really, really do, and they do it so well. And I just think that it may be kind of formulaic now, but it works.
They're knocking out of the park.
Yeah, they really are. You know, it's pretty amazing.
I haven't seen a bad one. Ratatouille was always my favorite just because of the line of work I'm in now. It's just there's something special about that little rat named Remy. So,
Yeah, there you go.
but as we start to wind down, I've completely
Good.
steered clear with I want to bring you back on, but I want to bring you back on with Robert because I always find it's fun to have multiple people on that have
Sure.
the same show. I would
Yeah,
like to go deeper into Billy and Mandy with both of you guys.
be
Uh,
happy to.
yeah, so that I think that would be fun. I don't get to do too many multiple people podcasts, just trying to line up schedules and stuff like that. But I'll
Yeah.
reach out to Robert and see if he wants to come on and we can talk Billy and Mandy.
Yeah, that'd be
But
great.
I didn't want to, leave the fans without some kind of Billy and Mandy talk. So we'll talk. Like I said, I'm trying to keep it really vague. But
No
do you have
worries.
a favorite episode for Billy and Mandy that you got to work on? I know you said it was one of the most gratifying times and most tight knit crews you got to work on. But you got a favorite episode?
Uh, of in general,
Actually, hold off on the episode for just a second. Do you have a favorite story when you think of whenever Billy and Mandy comes up? Is there a story that completely just comes to the forefront of your mind when you think of Billy and Mandy? And then we'll run into the episode.
yeah, there's a lot of them. Yeah, I think for me, it would be watching Richard Horvitz do Billy in the recording booth. I mean, I would be sitting in the control room watching him, and I'd be in tears.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be in tears and laughing so hard, you know, because you know if you take the rope off of him, it's going to be a hard time kind of reining him back in again. But you know, that was the beauty of it. That was the beauty of it, and there was just like, I don't think there was really anything that he did in the recording booth that we did not use. I think we just kept as much of his craziness as we could. And yeah, I mean, for me, I would love going to the recording sessions because having a belly laugh is such a good feeling. And it would be, you know, we'd always do them first thing in the morning. So it would be a great way to start the day and just set me up in a mood for the rest of the day, like nothing else. So, I mean, you know, for me, that was a good thing. And then we would, you know, as far as going out as a crew, yeah, there was a few times where we would go out and imbibe a little bit, and then imbibe some more, and then imbibe some more, and then, you know, seeing everybody the next day at the studio in the morning, you know, hovering around the coffee machine, trying to kickstart that day into gear. It was always fun, you know. But we were a family. We really were. And I know it sounds so cliched to say something like that, but it really was such a great environment, and I loved every minute of it. And, you know, like I said, it wasn't without its ups and downs, but it didn't matter.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
So, favorite episode, one that you worked on specifically, and one that you might not have worked on. You got a favorite one or two that you can think of?
Yeah, I have a favorite. I have two favorites that I worked on. One was that one I was telling you about, Attack of the Clowns, and another one was a show called episode called Hilly Billy,
Mm-hmm.
where we had a section of it where it goes retro animation, like all the way back to like mid to late 30s Disney, and I actually got to do my own Billy and Mandy version of the Skeleton Dance.
Oh, yeah. I remember this one.
Yeah. So that was another one of my favorites.
And you got to direct that one?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
That was a fantastic episode.
Thank you. I loved working on that one. I had a ball. And as far as like Attack of the Clowns, I really rallied for that one because, again, it's like even on the other shows I worked on, you were just assigned an episode. Mm-hmm. But when I saw the storyboard pitch for Attack of the Clowns, I immediately marched right into the producer's office and I said, I want that show. And he says, well, you're not scheduled for it. I want that show. And so, you know, God bless them. They pulled a lot of strings and moved things around, and I ended up getting that episode as well. And I ended up, I think I won an Annie Award for that episode, which is like the first award I'd ever won in my life. I mean, for anything. I never won anything before. So it was like, woohoo, you know, score.
Now,
As far as like overall favorite episode, hard to say. I have a lot of favorites. Just give me a second here. I gotta pull those tapes back up. Yeah, I can't pinpoint anything in particular, but I do have another one of the ones that I worked on that I personally, it was a personal thing for me because I grew up, I was a Hanna-Barbera kid, you know what I mean? Flintstones, Jetsons, Johnny Quest, all that stuff. And I had an episode of Billy and Mandy where Billy digs up Fred Flintstone in the permafrost in his front yard. And I got to do all these classic Hanna-Barbera moves from their old shows when I was animating Fred and timing the animation for Fred in that episode. So that was another favorite as well. But I have a really, I'm sorry, but I can't say I have an overall favorite because there's so many of them I like.
Oh, it's like trying to pick your favorite kid, man. Nobody's got a favorite kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But speaking of Hanna-Barbera for just a second,
yeah.
I actually just got to talk to, I don't know if you know him, I got to imagine you don't, probably don't know him, but you know the name, Bob Singer.
Yeah, I do know the name, yes.
Yeah, so he worked on the original Scooby-Doo, worked on the Johnny Quest, Jetsons, the Flintstones.
Oh, crazy.
I just had him on yesterday. The man's 94 in a couple weeks.
Wow.
And I'm talking to him, and he's telling me all of these stories of just the studios, what it was like to work with Bill and Joe, and then what it was like to work on Scooby-Doo and all of this stuff. And then to hear you're a little kid when those are coming out, right?
Flintstones. Absolutely.
So I saw those a lot in reruns when Cartoon Network got started and Hanna-Barbera,
yes.
And Boomerang and stuff like that. So I got to see a lot of those, secondhand, and probably 3 or 4 generations removed at that point. But those shows were so influential for me, just like growing my sense of humor. Like I don't think I would have the sense of humor I have now if I didn't have the shows like the Flintstones, the Jetsons, Billy and Mandy's, the Ed, Edd and Eddies, like all the shows that you guys have worked so tirelessly on. Can attribute to my twisted sense of humor, I guess is what I'm doing, so it's always fun when somebody can take something that they absolutely love, like you did as a kid, like those Hanna-Barbera cartoons. You see it in the storyboards, you're like, no, did you have to arm wrestle them? Did you have to like say, I'll hit you with one of these? Or how'd you go about getting that? You remember? Violence?
Yeah, no, but it did take a lot of back and forth. I mean, I went to Adam too, and I said, look, Adam, I really want to do that episode, and he goes, well, talk to Lewis, who was our producer, and I did, and I told him I did already. I said, go put in a good word for me, So yeah, no, because I don't think anybody else, because at the stage of the storyboard pitch, when we're all in the room for the storyboard pitch, no one knows who's going to get that episode anyway. Mm-hmm. So I laid claim to it early enough, I think, to make sure that I got it, and I did. So
well, I'm glad you did, man.
Thanks, man.
This has been a real fun chat. We've been going for almost an hour and 45 minutes almost.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it kind of flies by when you're having fun, right? So is there anything that you're working on that you can tell the fans about that we can push traffic towards when you can or when it is releasing? But what are you working on now that you might want to use now?
Yeah, presently I am working on a show at Disney TV called Big City Greens, mm-hmm. and it's we're producing our 3rd season right now. We're going to have a 4th, but there's 2 full seasons out there on Disney Plus right now, and it's actually one of the Disney Network's highest rated shows, which is really cool. Yeah. Again, this is very akin to working on Billy and Mandy for me, mm-hmm. At this point in my career. A great fun crew, great show, and I hope to stay with it until the train stops. But I would definitely recommend checking it out. I think you'll like it, and I think your audience will like it. It's called Big City Greens.
Got that one written down. So I've got nothing but time on the weekends when I'm not running my kid around for karate. He's a little point fighter, so his tournament season's getting ready to start back up. But yeah, we've always got some downtime to watch cartoons. I got plenty of time for cartoons, no matter what.
Oh man.
But like I said, Sean, man, this has been really fun. Robert, again, I appreciate you setting this one up for me. It's always fun when I can talk to somebody and they're like, hey man, if you enjoy talking to me, you got to talk to this guy because he's just fun. You got to talk to this lady because she's just as fun.
That's
So
cool.
it's always fun when I get to talk to new people. There's only really one way to end this, man. He's been Sean. I've been Julian. This has been What's in My Head podcast, and this has been another piece of your childhood.
Great. Good night.